Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the introduction to a 6-part course. And I want to start with a little bit of an introduction about myself. Some of you have taken lots of classes from me. Some of you have never met me before. Some of you are friends and neighbors, but have never been in one of my classes before. So let me just take a minute to kind of introduce you and let you know how I came to this point and learned about this stuff and how it's been such a life-changing experience for me. So I am a wife. I'm a mother of 3 adopted children, all of which have varying special needs, which has been a huge part of my own personal journey. But my experience in learning about health started a long time ago. And that was really as a teenager. I grew up as a typical American. I lived like a typical American. I ate like a typical American. I went to the doctor like a typical American, and all of those things. I was just a typical American. But by the time I was a teenager, I started getting really, really sick. And started being diagnosed with multiple things. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia as a teenager, and I was put on 3 prescriptions for that I was on every day just to function. And I was diagnosed with IBS, interstitial cystitis, anxiety and depression and allergies and all sorts of fun things. My body was screaming at me that it was not okay, and I did not yet know how to listen to my own body and respond to what it was telling me. And so I just medicated myself and kept moving forward the best I could. And then after I got married, I was diagnosed with endometriosis, and my endometriosis was not typical. It's not a fun disease for anybody, but in my case, it was highly, highly aggressive. And so it was literally just eating through my abdominal organs one at a time. And that led me to be all sorts of medications and treatments and things, but it also led to having 6 surgeries in 5 years. And each of those surgeries got more and more serious. And by the last one, they had to take out a big chunk of my colon because the endometriosis had eaten all the way through my colon and was literally growing inside my colon now. And so they had to cut that out. And that was the moment for me. That was the moment my life changed. Because it was at that point that I realized if I did not turn things around, I was going to die. I had done everything that doctors had told me to do, and I was only getting sicker by the day, sicker by the year, and I was losing more and more parts. And so with that last surgery, I had a moment. I still very clearly remember it. I remember where I was standing, where I realized, you know what, this has got to change. And this is my body, and no one cares about my body the way I do. Despite the fact that the doctors are trying to help me, they're not losing sleep over this, and my life is falling apart. And I took responsibility for finding the solutions for my health. And that was the changing moment in my life. And so though I knew absolutely nothing about it, that was the moment I dove headfirst into holistic medicine, because I had exhausted everything there was in conventional Western medicine. And so I had to look elsewhere. And beginning to look elsewhere is the best thing I ever did, because I found out that there are so many solutions out there that just we never find unless we go looking for them. And so that moment really was a huge blessing in my life. And at that time, what I did first was really getting into nutrition. I completely changed what I ate, and that alone turned around so much of my health. In that process, that was a really in-depth learning process for me. And if you want to learn all about the nutrition things I learned in that process, the things I teach from that to help other people heal, and how I changed my life through the nutrition, you guys can go on the Simply Divine Eating YouTube channel and check out the video on the 4 cornerstones. where I tell you all about that. But I was able to drastically change my life. I got off all of my medication. The diagnoses started disappearing, some within weeks, some it took me years, but they just started melting away and my life started changing. And that was such a powerful experience for me. And I was able to move forward feeling really good, doing really good, started adopting these beautiful children. And then I got children with really aggressive medical and emotional needs that drove me even deeper to look and learn even more. And then there was a moment in, I think it was 2014, where everything changed for me. And I had a massive bleeding colon tumor, and all indications were that that was malignant. And that was another one of those experiences that drove me to find new solutions that I did not know about. And I was able to heal that without surgery, without any medication, and have since had a colonoscopy, and it's completely clean and it's completely gone. And so that was another life-changing experience for me. But through all of those, I had never really mastered homeopathy. I had dabbled with it a little bit, and I'd never had good experiences with it, to be honest. I'd had some doctors who'd given me some to try and all of these things, but it had never really worked. And so I'd kind of blown it off. And then a couple of years ago, we got to the point that we were getting ready to do our third adoption. And this was a little 6-year-old girl from Thailand with a very complicated medical history. And we knew at that age was going to have enormous amounts of trauma. And as I was trying to prepare for that experience, I kept having the feeling I needed to learn homeopathy. And so I took classes, I studied, I started working on this, and it is hard. It is honestly hard for me to explain the experience with this. I have never felt so driven to learn anything in my entire life. And it has helped with the things in our family that we have not been able to solve any other way. And I'm going to share a whole bunch of personal stories with you guys tonight as we go through the actual science of this so that you guys can see how this works. But we honestly never would have gotten through this adoption without it. And so I'm grateful that God pushed me to learn this when he did. And since I have seen, as I have taught this and shared this, watched what it can do for other people, and it just still boggles my mind. And so that is what I'm going to share with all of you guys tonight. We're going to talk about this in a lot of specifics. I want you to really understand how this works and share the personal stories of what it looks like when it works, so you guys can see the power that this really has and that you can have at your fingertips in your own home, because you can do this in your own home. Okay, so let's go ahead and just dive right in here. And then once again, a reminder, if you have a question as we go, you can unmute yourself or you can type in the chat box and I'll be able to answer those questions for you. All right, here comes the fun stuff. Let's go. Okay, so first I want to share with you why I love homeopathy so much. And that is just because despite all the things I have been trained in, you guys, in my own health and in helping my family, I have gotten formal training in a lot of things, from neurofeedback to energy medicine to herbs to, you know, I mean, just all sorts of things. But homeopathy is the fastest, by far the fastest form of medicine I've ever found. And it is also the cheapest by far that I have found. And it is the most powerful, meaning that with the least amount of effort, you can reach the deepest into the human body and really change how the human body functions. So when you combine those factors, fastest, cheapest, and most powerful, it's hard to beat. And it's not that I don't still use all the other tools that I have, I do, and they're complementary and they can work together in amazing ways. But this one has like the power to just go in there and just you know, just hit an issue at its core in a way that really nothing else does. Okay, so cheapest, how much does a homeopathic remedy cost? Between $5 and $10. And that has the potential to last you forever. So really, is there anything more cost effective on earth than that? Like there isn't. It just is incredibly cost effective. Okay, it can eliminate symptoms in seconds, minutes, or hours. Now, of course, if you're working on a deep chronic issue, this is going to respond differently. But I tell you, if you start playing with this and trying it, you will experience this. You can watch things dissolve in front of your eyes. So let me share with you just one example of this in our house so you can see how this really is true. So after our daughter Jarinya came home from Thailand, after she'd been home a little while, she and I were going to do a mother-daughter trip for Mother's Day. This was my first daughter, and we were going to go. We just decided, we ran across a deal and we decided we were going to just do this spur of the moment mother-daughter trip for Mother's Day. And 2 days, we planned it like 5 days before we were going to leave. And just 2 days before we were going to leave, she is so sick. Like, she's come down with full-blown influenza. She's got a really big fever. She doesn't feel good. And she is just lying on the couch, motionless. You moms know what that looks like, right? This is when your kid doesn't care if you turn on a movie. They don't care if you feed them. They don't care about anything. They are just right out on the couch. And I'm looking at this and the plane tickets that leave in 48 hours and thinking, all right, I've got a problem. I knew how to start attacking that with herbs, but I did not have time. It would have taken me a couple of days to turn that around with herbs, and I did not have time. And so I started trying homeopathy. And I tried one remedy that looked like it might be a good solution. Nothing, like no response at all. She's still just as sick. So then I try a second one, no response, still just as sick. I try the third remedy and I finally found the right one, the one that was the one she needed. And I kid you not, in 5 minutes, she was sitting up and eating dinner. And the next morning, there was not one sign that she had ever been sick. And that was it. One dose of one remedy and influenza was over. That's how fast this can work. And I've seen that happen over and over. There again, I don't want to set up your expectations that that's what happens every time, because it's not. But that is how fast it can work. It is incredible to watch. Okay, the second advantage, or third, it doesn't just treat symptoms, it actually erases the problem. This is amazing, you guys, because instead of working on this concept, oh, sorry, I'm trying to open my chat box so that I can see if you guys are talking to me. There we go. Okay. Instead of just treating a symptom, which is how we're used to working, homeopathy works completely differently. What it does is it goes inside, like deep, and works on the deepest physical level to actually eradicate what was the problem underneath the symptom. And so you do it a few times and things get better and better and better, and then you can just stop. It's not something you do forever, because eventually it literally eliminates the weakness in the human body that started the whole problem in the first place. Here's an example of that. When I first learned about homeopathy, the first thing I wanted to target were some specific headaches that I got, because they were driving me crazy. I would get these completely incapacitating headaches. And there was an emotional trigger for them, and I knew what the emotion was. I had paid enough attention. I recognized what was creating these headaches. I knew it. And what bothered me the most was, despite the fact that I could tell what the trigger was, I had not been able to beat them. And so when I learned about homeopathy, this was the one I went in, I'm gonna get these headaches. I'm gonna get to the bottom of these headaches. And it took me quite a while, actually, to find the right remedy for them. But when I did, here's what happened. I took that remedy, and about 3 hours later, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, my headache's gone. Oh, okay. All right. So the next time the headache comes up again, I know what to do. I take the remedy, right? And an hour or two later, it's like, oh, okay, my headache's gone. And then the next time I had to do it, the headache was gone even faster. And I did that, I don't know, I did that for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, and the headaches just quit appearing. They just went away. It literally eliminated the trigger that was causing those headaches in the first place. So it's so cool because homeopathy will help you with your symptom at the moment, and it will go in and eliminate the weakness that's allowing that symptom to manifest. And so it fixes it altogether, which is just so cool. Okay, and then the last one, in addition to treating physical illness, this is the most effective thing I have ever seen for mental health. And in my family, we have a lot of mental health issues, okay? We've got a lot of trauma in this house. I am dealing with trauma of some kind, of some member of this family, pretty much about 50% of the time. It's a big deal. And this has been a lifesaver. I'll share one personal example of this. I have struggled with anxiety my whole life. It has been a really persistent problem for me. But one of the things that happened with our 2 international adoptions is that when you get down to about the last 3 months of the process, you're going through what's probably the most stressful paperwork phase, and hoop jumping governmental chaos of the process, and you're trying to prepare for these trips that they are the hardest trips on earth to plan because there are so many unknowns, and you're going into a place you've never been, and you're going to have a child who hates you for a while, and it's incredibly complicated. And so those last couple months are incredibly stressful. And with both of our international adoptions, during those last few months, I started having full-blown panic attacks. And by that, I mean the kind where you cannot breathe, you're locking yourself in a closet and hyperventilating, or honestly thinking you're going to die. And this last time, as that would happen, the second time around, I had homeopathy. And I was able to treat those panic attacks with homeopathy and watch them dissolve, absolutely dissolve in just a matter of minutes. It was astounding to watch. And so from things like that with anxiety to lots of other mental health and mental illness issues that we have dealt with, it has been astounding to watch the power of homeopathy for mental health. And even though I love what homeopathy can do for physical health, in this world where so many people now are struggling with serious mental health issues, if we could just get the word out to people of the power and the option that homeopathy is for mental health, we really could change the world just with that one thing alone. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to help you guys understand exactly what homeopathy is. Because this is where we get stuck. If we don't understand what homeopathy is, this can seem almost like pseudoscience, weird stuff, but it's actually very precise science. And so I want to show you guys how this works in a very scientific way, so that you really feel like you've got a grasp on what this is scientifically, and then we'll show you how it's actually used in real life. So what a homeopathic is, it's a very precise process of super dilution of a substance. So we're talking about hundreds or thousands of times something is diluted until all that's left is an actual imprint of the original substance. Okay, so if you look over at that picture on the slide, you start with what's called a mother tincture. Now, if you're someone who's into herbs and you've made your own tinctures, this is what that is. Okay, so you've taken a herb or a substance or a mineral or whatever, and you've put it in a form where you're able to extract the medicinal properties from that substance. Then what they do, most of these are done in liquid. There are minerals and stuff that are done in a solid version of this, but most things are done in a liquid. And so what they do is they take 1 drop of that mother tincture and they put it in 99 drops of liquid, usually alcohol, okay? So you've got 1 drop of tincture in 99 drops of alcohol. That is classified as a 1C dilution of a homeopathic. You're never going to see a 1C dilution because nobody uses it at that point. Then what they do is they take 1 drop of that 1C and they put it in another 99 drops of a neutral liquid. So now it hasn't been diluted twice, it's been diluted 100 times 100 times when you get to a 2C. Does that make sense? Because you took 1 drop and put it in 100 drops, and then you took 1 drop of that 1 in 100 and put it in another 1 in 100. And then you take 1 drop of that and put it in another 1 of 100. And then 1 drop. So each time you're diluting that, you're not diluting it 1 more time, you're diluting it 100 more times. Every time there is a dilution process of a homeopathic. Homeopathics are really never used at anything below a 6C. And the most common dilutions that are used are either a 30C or a 200C. So in a 30C, that process has been done 30 separate times. And in a 200C, that process has been done 200 times. So these are incredibly diluted substances. Now, here's, it's hard for me to say what my favorite thing about homeopathics is, but this might be it. This might. What this means is that you can make a homeopathic of anything. You can make a homeopathic of a poison. You can make a homeopathic of a toxin, because it has been diluted so many times that by the time it becomes a true homeopathic, what you have created is the antidote, not the original substance. And so what happens when you turn something into a homeopathic, most of the time, is it actually does the opposite of what the original substance would have done. Because you have literally diluted it so far, you've created an antidote. That's really the easiest way to think of it. So what that means is if you have a plant that is going to make someone throw up, like ipecac, right? Ipecac's been used for forever to induce vomiting when someone needed to vomit to get something dangerous out of their body. So you take ipecac, a plant that induces vomiting, and you turn it into a homeopathic. You dilute 200 times, and it now treats nausea. Now, how cool is that? Because what it means is that everything on the earth can be used to heal. Even the poisons, even the toxins, even anything can be used to heal. And I have a 100% personal belief from my experience that everything we need to heal with is already on this earth. God put it here before we were ever here. I believe that with every inch of my body, and I have now staked my life on that. So I have proven to myself that I believe it. I absolutely believe that. But this is one of the ways that that is possible, because when you turn something into a homeopathic, anything can be made into a healing substance. We know this principle of homeopathy was used as early as Hippocrates, the father of medicine, in 400 BC. But modern homeopathy was created by Samuel Hahnemann. And he did this in the 1700s. He's the one who standardized this process. Okay, and yeah, we'll show you exactly how that works here in a second. But what he discovered was this principle that if there was a substance that would create a symptom in a well person, it could also cure the same symptom in a sick person. And what he struggled for a while to figure out is, okay, well, how do we administer that without creating illness, right? Because if there's a substance that's going to make one person sick and another person well, how do we do this? And what he first started doing was this process of dilution. But what he found was by the time you diluted it enough that it was no longer dangerous, it also was no longer helpful. Like it didn't fix anything either. And so his question was, how do we do this? How do we dilute it enough that it's not harmful, but not so much that we lose all of its power to heal? And he discovered something, and people ask, how did he discover this? As far as I understand, according to him, it was by actual revelation, that he needed to do something that is known in the world as homeopathy as succussion. Okay, succussion is the key to homeopathy, and what that means is it's a principle of banging it. You're literally creating, you're just banging it against it to create literal vibration in the substance. And so what he discovered is if he did that process of dilution, right, 1 drop in 100, and then you succussed it. Okay, so there's this procedure of succussion that happens in between. And then you did it again, and you took 1 drop and you diluted it and you succussed it again. That what happened was the dilution process created a safe version of the substance while maintaining the healing property of the substance. And he believed fervently enough in the source of that process that he did all of his succussions on a Bible. That's what he would use to succuss his potencies. He would bang them on a Bible. And so they don't necessarily use a Bible anymore, but if you go to a homeopathic pharmacy that creates these now, and I have a link, actually I have a little video that shows how they're made in one of these homeopathic pharmacies, and I will post that on the Facebook group for you guys so that you can watch that. Or we'll do it in one of the other classes, but you actually get to see them make it. And they still do this in between every single dilution. So can you imagine that when you buy a 200C homeopathic, it has been diluted 1 in 100 and succussed 200 times. And most of those homeopathic pharmacies still do their 200Cs by hand. And so it's a really cool thing. But it's a very precise science. This little graph here is what's called the scientific method, okay? So the scientific method, you guys all learned this in school. You pick something you want to know how it works. You create a hypothesis of how you think it's going to work. You create an experiment that has only 1 variable. That's the important part of a scientific method being followed, 1 variable. You create an experiment with only 1 variable so that you can test your hypothesis. You record your data, you analyze your data, and then you create your report and you cycle back around. And you do this process until you have documented how something works. This is the scientific method. And this is exactly what Hahnemann did. So if anyone ever tries to convince you, and there are many, many people out there who do not understand how homeopathy works, who will try to convince you that this is somehow quack medicine, you guys, he followed the scientific method to the letter. He took every remedy 1 at a time, created each level of these dilutions, and then tested them on people to see exactly what happened. Now, you guys know this scene in The Princess Bride, right? He hooks him up to this machine, he tortures him with this thing, and then in this nice calm voice says, "So, tell me, how do you feel?" And writes it down in his scientific method book, right? Right? Well, this is what Hahnemann and his family did. They used themselves as the guinea pigs for this. And so we really owe them an enormous debt because they documented every single aspect of this. And as we go through the further classes, I'll show you the books, but I've got the homeopathic textbooks that take these remedies and list for you every single effect of every single homeopathic. And these books are this thick, okay? That's how in-depth these things have been studied. And so this is it's really a very highly precise form of science. Homeopathy is the second most widely used system of medicine in the world. This is a map that shows you everywhere that homeopathy is used, and it's pretty much everywhere that there are people. But it is most commonly used in India and Europe. And there are homeopathic medical schools where you go to school for 4 to 7 years, just like you would in any other medical school, to learn how to prescribe homeopathic remedies. I love this quote from Gandhi: "Homeopathy cures a larger percentage of cases than any other method and is, without all doubt, safer, more economical, and the most complete medical science." And as one who can say I have lived every form of medicine at this point, I think pretty much that is out there. I'm sure there's a few I have not discovered, but for the most part, I have personally experienced an awful lot of them, and I would agree with him. This is the one that will cure the most things with the least negative effects, and is absolutely the most complete medical science. So this isn't uncommon or weird. Homeopathy is used all over the world. We just aren't taught about it. And so it can take us a while to wrap our heads around this. And if it does, please don't be hard on yourself. It's a very different approach to medicine, and it takes some time, but that's okay. But just because it takes some time for us to wrap our heads around it doesn't make it fake, doesn't make it bad science. It works. It just absolutely works, and it's very documented. Now, if there's anything I want to help you understand tonight, it is this, and that is, how is homeopathy different from other forms of medicine? Because if you do not get this, if you do not understand this, you will use homeopathy and it will not work for you. And you will come out going, see, this doesn't work. This is what happened to me when I had tried to use homeopathy in the past, or when a doctor had handed me one and said, go home and take this every day for the next month. I wasn't using it, or they weren't using it, or both were not using it by the rules of homeopathy. And so it did not work. So if you have played around with homeopathy and you have not found it to be successful, I would be willing to bet the problem is you did not know, because nobody tells us, you did not know the rules of how homeopathy works. And it's completely upside down from how you are used to thinking. It is the complete opposite of how prescriptions work. It is the complete opposite of how herbs work. It's the complete opposite of how essential oils work, okay? So you cannot take any previous experience you have had with any other form of medicine and use it to help you in homeopathy. You've got to learn how to stand on your head and look at things a whole new way. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to teach you how to stand on your head and see the symptoms that you are experiencing, or someone that you love is experiencing in their body, and how to look at them homeopathically, which is going to be completely upside down. So we're going to go over 4 ways, okay? 4 very specific ways that homeopathy is the complete opposite of every other form of medicine you have ever used, all right? So number 1, it's based on the law of similars. Now, modern Western medicine is based on the law of contraries. Even herbal medicine is based on the law of contraries. Now, what that means is, if we have a symptom, we're going to try to take something that does the opposite so that hopefully they balance each other out. That means that if you have constipation, you're going to take something that induces diarrhea in the hope that your body ends up somewhere in the middle with a balanced bowel movement. That's how we do it. We give you the opposite problem to try to cure the original problem. Now, that is how we're used to thinking, but there are huge, huge disadvantages to that approach. Number 1, it doesn't actually fix the problem, right? Whatever was wrong in the first place to give you the diarrhea is still wrong. We didn't fix that or give you the constipation. It's still wrong. We just gave you diarrhea, which helped move some of the stuff, but the original problem is still there. Which is why most prescription medication, or even most essential oils or other things, have to be taken every day for the rest of your life, because they didn't fix anything. the problem's still there, okay? This is the case even with bacteria. When we approach it from a law of contraries thinking, okay, we need to kill the bacteria. That's what we think. Kill the bacteria, because the bacteria is creating our symptoms. That's not how homeopathy works, okay? We aren't actually going to try to kill the bacteria. We are going to try to fix the problem that was in your body in the first place that allowed that bacteria to grow, because a human body that is functioning the way it should doesn't let a bacteria grow in it. It doesn't. And so what we want to do is fix the problem in the body that allowed that bacteria to grow in the first place, and then the bacteria just disappears on its own. You don't actually have to kill it. So that, right? Like, is your brain spinning a little bit? It's a completely different way to think. But the other reason that treating by the law of contraries is such a less than ideal way to cure the human body is because there's always a side effect, or 10 or 20 or 30 side effects. Because if you are struggling with an autoimmune disease and we give you an immunosuppressant now to try to compensate your overactive immune system, now you have an immune system that doesn't work and you're going to get sick. If you treat something homeopathically, you're going to stop the body's autoimmune response. You're not going to weaken its immune system to do it. And so you don't end up with these huge long lists of side effects, because what a side effect is a new problem you introduced by creating the opposite problem of the first one, trying to treat the original symptom. That's what a side effect is. Original problem, deliberately create a second problem, hoping they balance each other out, but now we've actually induced a whole new set of new problems into the human body. So those are the disadvantages of that approach to medicine. Whereas when you treat by the law of similars, what it means is like cures like. So we aren't going to try to use opposites to cure. We're going to try to use similars to cure. So as we talked about with Ipecac, right? If Ipecac creates nausea, the homeopathic of Ipecac cures nausea. If mercury is a toxic substance, the homeopathic of mercury is a detoxer. Like cures like. It's hard to get your head around, but when you do, it's a whole lot of fun. The other thing this does, and we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, it permanently removes the whole tendency that created the disease by removing the underlying weakness that allowed it to develop in the first place. So we are not doing Band-Aids anymore. We are not putting a patch over to just try to stop the bleeding. We are healing the wound. Such a powerful thing. That's why I tell you this is so powerful, because you're literally going to reprogram your body. You're literally going to reprogram your body in a way that eliminates the initial problem in the first place. And what that means is that though treatment is temporary, the effects are permanent. And you guys, that's the definition of healing. If what we're doing doesn't create a permanent healing and doesn't eliminate the need for treatment, that is not healing. That's good business because they're making money, but it's not healing, not by any definition of the word. Healing means that what we're going to do is going to eliminate the actual problem so that the body is stronger, not weaker. And that's what homeopathy does, and I love it. Okay, then the number two way that homeopathy is different than what you're used to is that treatment is based on symptoms, not diagnosis. This is so hard for us at first, okay? People take my class and then they send me a text, or they get on the Facebook group and they're like, so what's the homeopathic for fibromyalgia? What's the homeopathic for asthma? They're still attaching a diagnosis. And as long as you are trying to attach a diagnosis, you haven't got your head quite in the right place, okay? Because what we're trying to do with homeopathy is look at symptoms, what they call a symptom picture. And you don't, and though that can be frustrating at first, right? Because I remember, you know, when I first was doing this and I was looking at autism spectrum stuff, and I'm like, okay, I just want to know what are the most common remedies used for autism spectrum. And I got so frustrated because everything I would read will say, well, you can't answer that question. Well, once I started really studying homeopathy, I understood why they couldn't answer that question, because there's no two people where that's going to look exactly the same. And though there are some trends, you've got to get a lot more specific in looking at your symptoms. So the key with homeopathy is you don't need to know why someone is hurting, but you do need to know what that hurting looks like for them. All right, in as many specifics as you can get. Okay, here's a personal example of how this plays out. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the remedy Potafilum. Okay, Potafilum is used for gastrointestinal pain, vomiting, you know, lots of intestinal issues. Now, my husband had an intern at work that was working with him, and she's, you know, in her 20s, and she doesn't have health insurance because she's just finishing up school and she's an intern, right? And she is just getting sicker by the day with abdominal pain, so much that over the course of a month, within 1 month, she could no longer eat. Okay, so she's just without just being in excruciating abdominal pain. So she goes to the doctor, right? And the doctor, of course, lists what tests are needed to be done. Because what a doctor is trained to do is take your symptoms, match them to a test, and then match the drug to the test results. So she goes to a doctor, and of course, what he does is he lays out for her the list of tests that they need to do to try to figure out what's going on in her abdomen that's causing the pain. Well, she's got a problem because she doesn't have the insurance to cover that. And these are expensive tests. They're going to do a colonoscopy. They're going to do an MRI. And she doesn't feel like she has that option. So she was talking to my husband, says, I know your wife does some of this stuff. Is there anything that would help? And so I send with my husband to work the homeopathic remedy Potafilum. Okay. She comes back to work the next day and the abdominal pain is gone. She's done. Now, she's never going to know what was wrong, but it doesn't matter because it's gone. I gave her a remedy that matched her symptoms, even though I didn't know what was wrong, and it didn't matter. Now, within like the same month, I had a neighbor who calls me, whose child has got, she's pretty sure has got rotavirus. Okay, this child is in agonizing abdominal pain, and it's gone on for almost a week at this point, and the child's just bent over and screaming and crying and whatever. And she's like, I've tried everything I've got. Do you have any ideas? I haven't tried yet. And so I give her the homeopathic Potafilum. 1 dose, the child is done. Okay, no more crying. 2 totally separate diseases, if you want to call it that, 2 totally separate diagnoses, but the same remedy, because the remedy matched the symptoms. It didn't actually matter what was wrong. And I know that is hard, like, believe me, I understand. I know that is hard to wrap your head around because we are so used to the process of thinking, okay, before we can treat something, we need to know what's wrong. But in homeopathy, you can completely skip that step. And that saves you tons of money and it saves you tons of time. It can be frustrating at first because, like Mackenzie said, we're like, but we want to know, like, we want to know what's wrong. But once you experience a few times the things of, well, it's fixed, and now not only is the symptom gone, I know that homeopathic actually got rid of the original problem. I don't really care anymore. And you get to the point that you don't care anymore. But it takes a while to get there, and it's okay. It's okay if that takes a while because it took me a while. It takes everybody a while. But it saves so much time and money. Okay, so like right now, let's look at the situation we're dealing with right now with the coronavirus. How much money and time and medical resources are being from a homeopathic perspective, completely wasted trying to discover if someone has coronavirus or not. I want you to think about how many billions of dollars we are spending to determine who has coronavirus and who doesn't. Now, if you're a homeopath, it makes no difference whether you have coronavirus or not. You look at the symptoms. If someone has got pneumonia because their lungs are filling up and they can't cough it out, you treat that. If someone has got a killer fever or so much exhaustion they can't stand up out of bed, you treat that. And it doesn't matter if they have corona, it doesn't matter if they have influenza, it doesn't matter what they have because they're going to get better. And it just, once you can wrap your head around that, it saves so much time and money. So much time and money. But that is why if you have a diagnosis and you ask a homeopath, what's the remedy for insert diagnosis here? They're going to say, I can't tell you that. It doesn't mean they're unwilling to help you. It's just because that isn't how it works. Okay. Reason number 3 that homeopathics are completely different than anything you've ever done. Less is more. This is really important. Really, really important. This might have been one of the main things I was doing wrong before I understood what I was doing. Okay, you do not need prolonged or frequent dosage with traditional homeopathy, however you want to say it. Okay, unlike herbs or drugs, you give a homeopathic. If you see it working, you stop. And then if you see regression, you do it again. But you don't just sit there and pound 3 times a day, 10 days in a row with a homeopathic. It's a bad, bad, bad idea. You can make someone sick doing that. You don't just pound it. Less is more. Okay, so here's another example from my life. So we have goats. We raise goats for milk. And we had a time this last fall where my husband, he travels for his job on international trips. And when he does, he's gone for a couple of weeks. And my husband was out of town, and those are intense times when he's gone for a couple of weeks and I'm taking care of the kids and the goat kids and all of this stuff. Well, I've got a goat that comes down with bronchitis. I listen to that goat cough and I'm like, oh, I'm in so much trouble. Like, he was sick. And there again, did I know how to treat that with herbs? Yes, I did. But once again, I didn't have time, right? I was trying to keep life going with all my human children and I did not have time to go out and try to get herbs down a goat 3 times a day for 10 days in a row. I did not have time. So I tried a homeopathic, okay? I gave him a homeopathic. I gave him 1 dose and I watched, and things were a little bit better. So the next morning I went out 1 day later and I gave him 1 more dose and things got a lot better. And so then I quit, right? Now that's a little bit panic inducing to most of us because we've been taught this antibiotic thinking, right? You finish the course, you finish the course, you finish the course, or things come back. But that's not how homeopathy works. So I'd given him 2 doses at that point and I quit. And I watched him and he was okay. And I'd go out the next day and he was okay. And I think I went like 3 days without giving him anything. And I went out the next day and it was like, oh, okay, he needs more. I gave him 1 more dose and then we were done. So you don't have to pound things with homeopathy. Now there again, if you've got a long-standing chronic issue, it's going to be a little different. You may treat things for a very long period of time. But especially with acute stuff, you just don't tend to. And that means that the person giving you the homeopathic also cannot tell you how to dose. So if you are being handed a homeopathic, right, and someone is saying, like many people had done with me before, take this once a day for the next 2 months, or take this 3 times a day for the next, that's not how homeopathics tend to work. So just keep that in mind. You need to watch how things are going to decide how to dose. No one's going to be able to completely predict. So if you're working with a professional homeopath, they're going to say, try it this many times, watch, and then we'll talk again, right? And then we'll figure out how to go from here, because it's too hard with homeopathy to project into the future. The other way that less is more is the more times a homeopathic has been diluted, the more potent it gets. And this is very, very, very important to understand. That process of dilution, succussion, dilution, succussion, dilution, succussion makes a remedy more potent as it goes, not less. So if you are using a 6C homeopathic, right, that's been diluted 6 times, that is a very mild homeopathic. If you are taking a 1M that has been diluted 1,000 times, that is a very potent homeopathic. So the more it has been diluted, the more potent it becomes, and the more careful you've got to be about how you dose it. When you're dealing with in the 30C range, the 200C range, it's going to be very rare for you to, you can play. Like you can make a mistake, no big deal. You don't play with the remedies in the 1,000 dilution range, okay? Because those are incredibly powerful remedies, incredibly powerful medicines, and you don't play around with those. You use those when you know what you're doing. So the more dilute, the more potent.
And Angie, I just want to clarify.
Yes.
It's the more diluted and succussed that makes it powerful. If you just dilute it, it doesn't make it powerful. It has to be succussed.
Yep, it's that combination. It's a homeopathic dilution, which means they've diluted it 1 to 100 and they've succussed it each step. Yes.
Right, yes. When you're doing it the traditional way.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for the clarification, Tamara.
So when you're saying diluted, you always mean and succussed too, as long as everyone knows that.
Thank you. Tamara keeps me on board.
It's like when I say, hand me the butter. When I was little, we had margarine. So we always called it butter. Anyway.
Thank you. Yes, very true. Okay, anything else?
So I think we just answered the other question that just popped up, which was, is it the succusses that makes it more potent?
Yes. Yep, it is. Absolutely it is. Okay, good. Thank you, guys. Okay, number 4. This is really fun. How much you give makes no difference. Okay. Another frequent question people have with homeopathics is, how much do I give? It doesn't matter. Give someone 1 drop, give them 200 drops. Makes no difference. If you're using the little pellets, give them 1 pellet, give them 3,000 pellets. It makes no difference. Now, I know that's hard, so take a breath, okay? But it's true. How much you give does not determine the dosage of a homeopathic. What determines a dosage is the potency, okay? So what we just described, the number of times it's been diluted and succussed, that's the potency. So that makes a difference. And then the other is how frequently you give it. That is the important thing with a homeopathic. How often are you giving it? Okay. So an aggressive dosage of a homeopathic means you give it every 10 minutes. That's incredibly aggressive, right? More laid back, less of a dosage would mean give it once a day. It's frequency. Frequency determines the aggressiveness of the dosing, that and the potency. Now, because the more something has been diluted and succussed, the more potent it is, and because frequency determines dosage, are you guys listening? Really important. The more potent the remedy, the less frequently you can give it. Does that make sense? If you've got something that's been diluted 1,000 times, do not give that to someone every 10 minutes. Okay, bad idea. Okay. However, if you have something that's a 30C, feel free to give it every 10 minutes. But yeah, but age doesn't make a difference. the only thing you need to take into account, and we'll get to this eventually, but we'll just talk about it now, is that a homeopathic can induce a healing crisis. Okay, so if you've done other forms of holistic medicine is designed to eliminate the underlying problem permanently. That's what holistic medicine is designed to do. And what that usually means is there's junk that's got to get out, right? We've got to get stuff out. We've got to get toxins out. We've got to get pathogens out. We've got to get anger out. There's stuff we have to get out to heal. And in that process, when you do holistic treatments that start to induce that detoxing process, it can induce what's called a healing crisis, which is a temporarily worse stage as your body starts to dump the junk. So it's not the same as a side effect. All it is your body gets overwhelmed for a little bit as all of a sudden it's trying to literally pull all this crud out of your lymph system or out of your digestive system or whatever and get it out. So that's a healing crisis. A homeopathic can induce a healing crisis. And the more serious the issue, the more likely you're going to induce a healing crisis. So the sicker the person is, the less you want to burden them with a healing crisis, correct? And I'm talking chronic illness here, not acute. You don't want to burden someone who's really chronically ill with an intense healing crisis. And so in that case, you are going to start with a low potency just to mitigate the healing crisis. It doesn't mean that a higher potency wouldn't necessarily be valuable, but you're going to start slow and gentle just to help not dump them with a healing crisis. So in that case, but see, that's not necessarily age-based, right? That's, you don't want to overwhelm the system of someone who's chronically ill.
Because do you think that will just make maybe even like their mental state worse? Like,
yeah, it's hard to cope with.
Aspects, it just makes it worse.
Yeah, it's hard to cope with, and you've got a body that's already stressed, and so you don't necessarily want to stress it more. All right, so let's go through some of the advantages of homeopathy here. Okay, one, it's fast. So we talked about this already. I gave you an illustration at the beginning, and I'm talking about acute, of course, not chronic, but you can stop shock. You can stop an asthma attack. You can stop a panic attack in 20 seconds. I've watched it happen. I've stopped my own panic attacks in seconds. My daughter, who has a ridiculous history of respiratory disease, awful history of respiratory disease. When we brought her home, she would start wheezing. We would give her a homeopathic, seconds over, done. And that thing about then number two, it fixes over the moment and then permanently. We did that with her 3 times and she's never wheezed since. We haven't had to keep giving it. It's incredible. It's incredible to watch. I already told you the story of her flu. That's her asthma. Another one with her was growing pains. She started all of a sudden just crying at night about her shins hurting. I gave her the homeopathic for growing pains, and she looked at me, like literally looked at me and talked to me and went, "Oh, that's better," and rolled over and went to sleep. Okay, this stuff is so fast. It's so stinking fast sometimes. There again, if it's not fast, there's reasons sometimes it's not, and we'll talk about those more as we go. So you don't necessarily have to think something's wrong if it's not fast. But what I want you to know is, yes, you can use homeopathy when someone's life is hanging on the line, because it can work that fast. It can. We're talking about things like shock, asthma, panic attacks. Yes, you can literally stop that stuff fast enough to save someone's life. Now, that doesn't mean I'm telling you that that's the method you have to use or that you should use. I am not a doctor. I do not prescribe, and I do not tell you what to do. But what I do want to do is I want you to know this option is available. What breaks my heart is that people don't know about this. What breaks my heart is that I went 40 years without knowing about this stuff. Like, I would have had a different life. I would have had a different life. if I had known about this stuff. And so we've got to start spreading the word. It's okay if someone doesn't want to use this. That's fine with me. But I don't want anyone not to know that it's an option. That is my goal of these classes. I don't want anyone not to know that they have these options. Now, the other reason you're not going to hear about this is because this is not a good business model, right? Something that costs $5 and permanently fixes the problem so no one ever has to come back. This is not a good business model, right? This doesn't keep people in business, which means they can't pay for commercials and they can't pay for multi-billion-dollar studies, and they can't, because this stuff doesn't make money. And so that's why you've never heard of it, because all of the ways that the prescription medical industry uses to push their products at us cost so much money. And they have that much money because their medicines cost billions of dollars. And it's an industry with a 300% markup on their products over their cost. It's crazy. But that's why they can pay for all of that stuff. In homeopathy, you can't. So the only way this can spread is if you guys tell people. We have to tell people so that there again, they at least know they have the option. Here's a couple more illustrations of that thing of solving things permanently over time. I've told you those first two on the list, but let me tell you this last one. My oldest son reacts to food a ton. We have to be very, very careful with his diet. And he was at a place where every time he would eat anything with oats in it, he'd get terrible gas and bloating. And so I had just taken oats out of his diet because I could see they were stressing his body out. And yeah, wow, that's a pretty typo. Anyway, so I'd taken oats out of his diet, but he loves no-bake cookies. It's one of his favorite things. And I, of course, have a healthy recipe for those. But they would make him sick. So finally, one time when he wanted the no-bake cookies, we gave him the no-bake cookies. And then I gave him a homeopathic for gas afterwards. And the gas went away. It's like, okay, that was great. So the next time we make him no-bake cookies, we give him the homeopathic for the gas and he's just fine, no symptoms. Third time we make the no-bake cookies, don't need to give the homeopathic. Have never given it again. Okay, there again, does it matter what was wrong? No, it's gone. It doesn't matter what was wrong, but it's gone. And that's how homeopathy works. Okay, number 3 here. It requires very little, oh yeah, question?
Somebody's just asking, so do you just give 1 drop or 1 pellet since more doesn't matter?
If in drops, yes, because you might as well conserve what you've got. In pellets, they recommend you use at least 3 or 4 just because you may get some that are blanks. And so the recommendation to take 3 or 4 pellets is because they want to make sure you get at least one that's got the active remedy on it. That process of coating the pellets with the remedy is not foolproof. And so by taking multiple pellets, you're just covering that risk. That's all it is.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Number 3, it requires very little effort and the person doesn't have to cooperate. This number 3 is written from the perspective of a mom, especially with children. Okay. One of my biggest problems there again was just dealing with situations with kids who are completely irrational. And that's when they need help the most, right? Is when they're completely irrational. So it only takes me seconds to give them a homeopathic and they don't even have to cooperate. I have found that this is a time where liquids are better than pellets because if you put pellets in a child's mouth that's mad at you, they spit them at you, right? But if you have a dropper and you have your homeopathic in a liquid form, you can just drop a drop on their lips, even on their skin if you can't get it to their mouth, and they don't have to cooperate at all, and they still get the remedy. Really, and animals too. I just drop it on our dogs, on our goats. I just drop it on their nose. I just put a drop of the liquid on their nose. I don't have to, like pry their mouth open and stuff stuff down their throat. It's really, really easy. It's cheap. We've talked about that, covered, huge advantage. Number 5, it always fixes more than you are intending to fix. This is cool to watch, especially if you are a really observant person who's into details so that you're going to notice this stuff. This is really fun to watch. So you're going to pick out a homeopathic because your child has got bronchitis. And then 3 weeks later, you're going to go, huh, they're more cooperative about their homework. Like, you just, it's interesting because homeopathics heal at such a deep level, they always heal at the emotional and physical at the same time. And so if you're targeting something emotional, you're going to notice physical things get better. And if you're targeting physical, you're going to watch emotional things get better that you were never trying to fix. And it's just fun to watch. You know, my daughter was having stomach issues, and she was having stomach pain after every meal. Okay, now, if you know much about medicine, you're going to go, oh, dang, we've got gallbladder problems, right? Pain after every meal, we've got a gallbladder issue in a 7-year-old. Dang. Okay, there's not pretty solutions to that. Well, unless you have homeopathy. And then you start giving her drops. And not only does the stomach pain go away, but one of her paranoias does too. You know, it's interesting to watch. It's really interesting. Number 6, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning. This is the most effective thing I have ever found for mental and emotional health and trauma. My second child that we adopted from India when he was 2, when you talk about trauma, there is fight, flight, fright, and freeze. And he is a freeze. So what that means is that neurologically, based on trauma in his first months of life, his brain wired so that whenever he encounters anything that his body recognizes as a threat, his body and his brain freezes. And I mean completely. I mean paralyzed. I mean glazed over, unresponsive, total freeze. When we brought him home from India, he was frozen about 50% of the day, every day. Over time, we got that a little bit better, and it wasn't as constant. But what did not change is the fact that anything happened. You told him, no, he can't go out and run through the sprinklers, he freezes. You discipline him for anything, he freezes. He gets upset about anything, he freezes. Can I just say that's a really hard way to parent? It's a really hard way to parent. And so, you know, we did the best we could, but most of what we had to do was adapting. And then we found the homeopathic for freezing. And he has changed so much. It is not 100% gone yet, but I would say it's about 85% gone. And we're still working through it. And that's one homeopathic. Now, given more than once, but a single homeopathic that targets that freezing, that's one of the characteristics is freezing, I would say 85% better at this point. Does anyone want to even guess how much money and how many years of therapy it would have taken to get that far? Probably 25 years and tens of thousands of dollars to get enough therapy to help that child get over his freezing trauma. And we're talking a couple of months of one $5 homeopathic. It just, you know, it's astounding. You know, and I've talked about my anxiety. Depression is another huge one. There is a specific homeopathic for depression with suicidal thoughts. It's called Aurum metallicum, A-U-R-U-M, Aurum. It is the homeopathic of gold. How interesting is that? Aurum is specifically for that hopeless, dark depression where you just cannot see out. I have felt that one myself. I have gotten to that point just based on the stress of my everyday life, where I've gotten to that point where it's like, there is no help. It's never going to get better. I'm never going to be able to pull out of this. And I have taken Arum, and about 2 or 3 hours later, gone, oh, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Guys, please, please tell people that this is available. It's just, mental health is costing our society so much, and this stuff is so cheap and it's so simple. And if you've got a teenager that is struggling, you don't even have to talk to them about this. Wait till they're sleeping and go put a drop on their lips. Okay, so my daughter, you know, there's lots of signs of trauma, there's signs of abuse, but we don't know what happened. You know, there's no way for us to know what happened. But the place it shows up the most with her is during the night. She screams during the night. When we first brought her home, we would have 2-hour-long, uncontrollable, like caged animal screaming things during the night. And the remedy that we have used for that is called stramonium, and it is an abuse and trauma one that is specifically tied to the symptom of night terrors. You know, we're not talking bad dreams, we're talking those horrific night terrors, right? And every time we have given her that remedy, she has been able to roll over and go back to sleep. And as we're using that, we're using it less and less frequently, which tells me that it is healing, slowly healing the underlying trauma, even though we don't know what happened. There is a degree of letting go of this and just letting the homeopathic do what it does. When you've done a lot, you know, all of us are so familiar with different ways of approaching health that there are things we have to let go of, you know, to embrace this new way of doing it. And it doesn't mean you have to dump your other tools, and not at all. You know, look at number 9, no drug interactions. What that means is if you're on a lot of medication, you don't have to go off your medication to start using homeopathy. You don't have to stop doing anything you are doing. You can add homeopathy to what you're doing. And then what you will probably see happen is that the need for those other interventions is going to gradually lessen. And should you choose, you can choose to then gradually lessen other interventions you're doing. But you don't have to quit doing anything you're doing to start using homeopathy. Add it to your toolbox. Don't feel like homeopathy requires you to dump everything you've ever used or everything you've ever learned. Add it. Add it to what you already have. No matter what that is, just add it to your toolbox. And as you start to use it and actively use it and see where it works for you and see where you still prefer to use other methods and whatever, you'll develop kind of your own feel for this and where and how you choose to use it. There again, my goal is not to force this on people. My goal is simply, I want you to know that it's an option. And then you can, within whatever is your own experience, your own set of tools, your own whatever, see where this fits, see where it helps you, and use it where it helps. If you've got a place that you're just stuck and you haven't been able to break through, see if this is what will do it. There is something very physical also about homeopathy. I think that's one of the reasons I like it. It's like it's the perfect marriage between all these different things. Do you know what I mean? It's got the actual substance of the plants in it. It's got the energy aspect to it. It's got the scientific aspect to it. It's got the intuitive aspect to it. It's like it pulls all of them together. And so there's so many different ways you can go about using this. And there again, we can talk more about that as we go through. But what I want you to understand today is what this is and how it works, so that you can see where this fits in your own framework, and that is going to be different for every person. Okay, let me go back and grab number 8 here because we skipped that, and I want to share some stories with you here. This cures things that are incurable, things that the rest of the world has no answer for. here's probably my biggest homeopathy story. So because of the surgery that I had where I had my colon resected, I've obviously got a lot of scar tissue in that area of my abdomen. And my colon isn't actually where it should be. It's in a new place now, and I've got all of this stuff going on. So one of the things that happened was about 5 or 6 years ago, I started having repeated intestinal obstructions. And I mean an intestinal obstruction to the degree that I had a lump sticking out of my abdomen. So like you could see exactly where the stuff was stuck, okay? Because it was backed up enough that there literally was a hump in my abdomen. And yet I've gone through a lot of painful things in my life, but this one takes the cake. This is the most painful thing I have ever had. And it's life-threatening, right? Because those can rupture. And the more times it happens, the more life-threatening it becomes, because the weaker that spot becomes as it is stretched, and it's stretched and stretched. And I was having these 1 to 2 times a month for 5+ years. Okay, these were awful. And I had done everything. I had been to the ER, nothing they could do about it. I'd been to surgeons and they're like, oh, you probably have too much scar tissue there. Oh, thank you. Yes, I knew that. That was really helpful. But I was such a surgical risk that they, because of all my history, they didn't want to go in there and mess with anything. And so they wouldn't do surgery. And then I went to every holistic, amazing, knowledgeable person I knew. And people tried all sorts of things. We approached this from every possible avenue there was to approach this. And we found some things that got me through them better, but nothing that stopped them from happening, nothing. And I'm going on 5 years of this. And once again, it's like, okay, this is a life-threatening and absolutely agonizing situation. And eventually the only thing I found that could stop it was 100% fasting, like no food. And they tended to follow my cycle. And so with that cycle, I would just have to have weeks where I did not eat. That was the only way I could stop them. And this is where I was when I discovered homeopathy. And so obviously for a very long time, we tried a lot of homeopathics, and it has taken some time. And first what we found were some that got me through the episodes better. Like it took it down, took the intensity down about 50%. And that was a huge blessing even in itself, to take that down about 50%. But we finally found it, and we found the homeopathic that has stopped them. And I have not had one in 4 months, I think. Okay, you guys, no one could fix that. No one. And I know some amazing people on this planet, and a homeopathic did. This stuff, there again, it may not be as straightforward as you want to find the solution. Homeopathy can be a windy road until you find the right one, but you can cure the incurable. My son that struggles with dyslexia, we start treating the freezing, guess what gets better? All of a sudden he starts reading. You know, it's just, it's interesting, you know, things that you think are incurable, this stuff can tackle. Number 10, no side effects. Talked about that. And 11, it's no big deal if you get it wrong. You know, like when I did that thing with the flu with my daughter, it took me 3 tries. It didn't matter that it took 3 tries, it's fine. You know, when you're doing these lower potencies, if you get it wrong, it's okay. So you don't have to stress about making a mistake. You can practice. And that's my biggest encouragement to all of you. Practice with this. This is half a science and half an art, and it just takes practice. Okay, so let's talk about how do you choose a remedy, all right? Because there's thousands of them. Thousands and thousands and thousands. You can make a homeopathic out of anything, right? You just dilute succuss, dilute succuss, dilute succuss. So you can have a homeopathic of anything. So there's thousands and thousands of them. So what you're looking for is what's called a symptom picture. You want to have a list of as many physical symptoms as you can, as well as many emotional symptoms, both. So if you're targeting a physical issue, you still need to look at how they're feeling emotionally. And if you're targeting an emotional issue, you still want to look at what their physical symptoms are, because they're paired. They're always paired. And looking at that pairing is what helps you pick the right homeopathic. So for example, arsenic and album, which is the one that has stopped my intestinal obstructions, okay? One of the keynotes of arsenic and album is that you tend to have anxiety and depression symptoms, and you tend to have digestive symptoms. That's one of the markers for that one, that those two go together. So anytime you look at someone who is struggling with anxiety, depression, and digestion, pretty good shot that arsenic and album is going to help, because it's that combination of physical and emotional that helps you pick the right homeopathic. Now, there's some really weird things that help you pick the right homeopathic, okay? One of the things that you're always going to want to look for is what makes it better and what makes it worse. Always is, does warmth help or cold help? That's almost always one of the distinguishing factors. Are they better indoors or in fresh air? Very often one of the distinguishing factors. What things that they're eating makes it worse and which things make it better? Or do they feel like eating or they don't feel like eating? Are they thirsty? Are they not thirsty? Those are the kinds of little things that when someone mentioned that I can find multiple ones that look like they might fit, and I don't know which one, it's those little distinguishing factors that help you narrow it down. And so you're looking at some very interesting, very often the remedy descriptions are going to talk about how the person smells, or how the rash smells, or what it's oozing, or, you know, you're going to get really specific as you look at this to create this symptom picture. You know, hot and cold is a huge one. Is the person always hot? Are they always cold? Are they always cold, but even though they're always hot or always cold, they still always kick the covers off? I'm not kidding. That's one of the descriptions of one of the homeopathics. Despite the fact that they're always cold, they always kick the covers off. Or one of them for sulfur is they always stick their feet out of the covers. I mean, it's really interesting that when they've documented these for for hundreds of years, what patterns they've found. They're really specific. Okay, so you're going to look at what things they fear. Very often dreams. Certain homeopathic remedies have certain dreams that tend to show up. Things they crave. Those are all things you're looking at. So it's an interesting thing. You have to become a detective in a new way because you're looking at this picture. Now, the more acute the symptom, I think the less details you tend to need, and the more chronic the symptom, the issue, the more details you need. Because, you know, if it's just, oh, my kid's got an earache today, that's more straightforward than this person has CFS, right? Chronic fatigue syndrome. You're going to have to get a much bigger picture to find the right remedy for that. So, but you are looking for this picture. This picture. Which side of the body? That's a huge one. Which side of the body is it worse on? I have found for me that with earaches, there's one remedy I have to take that works for me if the earache is on my right side, and there's a different one that works for me if the earache's on the left side. And almost all remedies tend to predominantly treat one side of the body. So that's another thing you're going to look at. Questions on that? Do I want to look at the clock? I probably don't want to know what time it is. Oh boy. Okay, we need to talk faster. Okay, so to find the right remedy, you're going to find the one that matches as many things as possible. You're never going to find something that matches everything, but you're trying to find one where you start checking off boxes. Oh, yep. And the more complete the match, the more things it will heal. So in homeopathy, you're going to hear about something called someone's constitution, or their constitutional. And what this is, and this goes all the way back to Hahnemann, is that the feeling that most people have one remedy that matches the most things about that person all the time. So you're not talking about an acute flu or they've got an ear. You're talking about all the time, okay? There is a remedy that the symptom picture matches that individually the most closely. And when you can treat someone with their constitutional remedy, you will solve the most things on the most level with one remedy than any other way you can go about it. And so a huge part of homeopathy is trying to identify someone's constitutional. Now, that's one approach of treating with homeopathy. The other is treating the state the person is in, okay? So there are things that can happen to us, whether it's an illness, a trauma, or something that will push us into a state that is not our native state, okay? And then you may be using a homeopathic that is not your constitutional. So let me see if I can give you an example of this. So a very common homeopathic is Pulsatilla, okay? That's a flower, it's a cute little flower. And Pulsatilla people, if it's their constitutional remedy, Pulsatilla people tend to be very emotional, very sensitive. They want lots of people around them. They need reassurance. They need people. They need, they tend to cry very easily. And when they cry, they need someone to hold them and say, it's okay, it's gonna be okay. They need that reassurance. They need people. Okay, does that give you a little bit of a picture of what a Pulsatilla is like? Okay, I'm not a Pulsatilla. I'm not even close to a Pulsatilla. I'm what's called a Napmir, which is someone who has walls built up 6 feet in front of them and wants to deal with everything in private. Okay, that's me. So I am not a Pulsatilla by any stretch of the imagination. However, there are things that will push me into a Pulsatilla state. PMS will push me into a Pulsatilla state. And I have found right before my period starts, when all of a sudden I start getting emotional about everything, Pulsatilla helps a lot. See, so it's not my constitutional remedy, but there are things that will push me into a Pulsatilla state, and then Pulsatilla helps a lot. So there's 2 different ways you're looking at homeopathic remedies and choosing them. You may be looking for the constitutional, and honestly, that's a really good time to hire a professional that's been to 4 to 7 years of homeopathic medical school, because picking your constitutional is not that easy, guys. Sometimes you'll stumble across it and you'll try something and your world changes and it's like, whoa, there it is. Like, you know, but it's not that easy to find your constitutional remedy, and it's worth paying someone who knows how to do that, because it's way cheaper than anything else you're going to do to help yourself. But when you're dealing with states, it's a lot easier to self-diagnose. And so there's a lot of these more state types of things that you can do in your own home. You just practice, you learn, you read, you know, we're going to give you as much as we can in this class to help you do that. And you can start learning to do that kind of thing yourself. And you need to understand about Googling about homeopathic remedies. Do not Google to learn about homeopathy in general. It's a really bad idea, because on June 3rd, 2019, Google, based on who was paying their bills, changed their algorithms to deliberately bias against natural health sites. And so they are now literally built to show you things posts that are against natural health instead of for natural health. That's how the algorithm works now. And you need to know that it's no longer a neutral platform. They've created a deliberate algorithm to favor specific medical practices and deliberately try to badmouth other medical practices. So just be aware of that. So here's how I do suggest Googling about homeopathics, okay? So don't Google what is homeopathy. Do not Google does homeopathy work. Do not, you're gonna go in a black hole because it's deliberately stacked to be that way, okay? Like anything in the world, if you want to learn about something, learn about it from people who have studied it. Don't learn about it from people who are just biased against it because they don't understand it. That's never a good way to learn about anything. All of you should understand that. You understand prejudice, you understand persecution, okay? You need to learn about things from the people who have studied them. So here's how to do that, okay? If you are looking for a homeopathic remedy for a specific symptom, type the symptom and then type homeopathic next to it, okay? And it should pull up sites that will give you some resources you can study for using homeopathic for that specific symptom. Now, as we've talked about, there's no one remedy for anything. So a reputable source, what they're going to do is they're going to list 3 to 10 of the top homeopathic remedies for that specific symptom, and then they're going to tell you how to tell the difference of which one you need. Okay, so let's say you type in earache homeopathic, okay? A good site is going to say, okay, if the earache comes on suddenly and the ear is hot, you use belladonna. If you've got shooting pain down the side of it and it's predominantly on the right side, you use mercury. I mean, those are the kinds of things they're going to say, and those are all real remedies, but they're going to give you the top so many remedies and then tell you how to distinguish which one probably is the best match for you. So if you guys get on Facebook and you say, tell me what remedy to take for this, I'm going to say to you, did you research it? Did you try? Did you look? Did you read? Okay, I do not want you guys to be dependent on me. It's not that I'm not willing to help, I am, but please try first. Okay, because I want you guys to know how to do this. And if you get stumped, it's perfectly fine to ask for help. But I'm not going to let you use the Facebook group as a place to come in, dump all your symptoms without looking or studying and expect everyone else to solve it for you. Okay, just a little boundary setting there. All right, so here are some of the good sites that will tend to come up that are reputable sites that will really help you. The website Homeopathy Plus has a whole section called Know Your Remedies. It's really, really useful. If you want to just go in and start to get an idea, what does belladonna do? What's it good for? I've had it sitting in my house for 6 years and I've never known what to do with it. What does it do? Go to Homeopathy Plus, Know Your Remedies, and read about it. Okay, it's a really good source. I do not know why Elma Skincare is a good source of information about homeopathy, but they are. If you Google a remedy and the Elma Skincare, they are very descriptive about all the different remedies and what things they're good for. It's a good source. Homeopathic.com is a good one. BritishHomeopathic.org. Let me give you a little bit of disclaimer about this website. Probably the most awesome site there is. If they have a discussion of the remedy or the symptom you want to learn about, this is your gold mine. However, it is so in-depth, it may give you a headache. Okay, so just know that ahead. If you want to dig deep into a remedy, go there. If you don't go there. They'll give you every aspect of that remedy that could possibly be looked at, from the actual chemical makeup of the plant to the mythology that goes with that plant to all the, it's incredibly in depth. So just know that. If you love that, you'll like BritishHomeopathic.org. If you don't, if you want surface kind of easy, straightforward stuff, don't go there. HomeopathyCenter.org is another good. Now, I have found it is more effective for me to type in the symptom that I want and homeopathic and see what comes up than to actually go to one of these websites and try to search within the individual websites. But when you are looking through all the options Google gives you, just know that if you see any of these come up, those are good ones to click on. They tend to be really helpful websites. And these are all in your outline. For those of you who are in the 6-week class, you also have all the outlines of all these classes. So you don't have to be madly writing these down. These are all in your outline as well. Okay, where do you buy homeopathic remedies? Okay, a lot of you have probably bought them at the health food store. So at the health food store, they have the sugar pellets. So what it is it's a sugar pellet that's been coated with the homeopathic remedy on it. And you can buy the little tubes of those pellets, and they're just in little stands in your health food store in their vitamins, somewhere in their vitamins section. At a natural food store or a vitamin store, whatever, they usually only have these in 6X, 12X, and 30C. It's very rare to be able to find them above 30C as far as potency goes. I've had people tell me that Sprouts carries a few 200C remedies. I haven't ever bought homeopathics at Sprouts, so I haven't looked myself, but that they have a few. So just know you can get the most common ones at a health food store, but they will be the low potency. Now, why are they selling the low potency at a health food store? Because it's impossible for anyone to do any harm with a low potency. And so it's considered safe to sell homeopathics to people who have no idea what they're doing in a 30C. That's considered safe. They can't do any harm, even if they've never picked up a book about homeopathy ever. They can't do any harm, okay? And my favorite place to live is 200C. That's the potency I use the most, because it's strong enough to kick things sometimes even with one dose, but it's still mild enough to not do any harm if you get it wrong. And so when we are going to do a group kit buy as part of this class, for those of you who are in this class in the coming classes, you buy a kit of 100 and you will have 90 to 95% of what you would ever need. There may be some times where you need a specialized remedy that wouldn't be in the kit, but it's not going to be very often. So that's the advantage of having a kit. So that will be, as well as the fact that it will be cheaper. We're going to be selling the kits for somewhere in the $3 to $4 per remedy range. So it's considerably cheaper. And they're the 200C ones that you can't find at the health food store. So it is a considerably cheaper way to do it. Another good entry way to get your homeopathics is from Butterfly Express. Butterfly Express is predominantly an essential oil company. They are in Idaho. If any of you have already used them for essential oils, they have their homeopathics listed as blessed waters. Now, don't freak when you see that. That is a legal term they are using for legal reasons. Okay. Recently, there have been all sorts of new legal things being written about homeopathics that are making it challenging. And so doing it as the blessed waters is a legal thing. So they're the homeopathics. You can find an awful lot of homeopathics there. Most of them are in that $5, $6 range per remedy. And you can still search on their website by the traditional Latin name. All homeopathics are by Latin name. So you can still search that way. So there's some really good ways to start building up a collection. Now, I want to give you one very clear piece of advice, okay? Don't go buy any remedies tonight, okay?
I've heard that these remedies are super sensitive to EMFs. Is that true? And how do you protect them? And can you use them while pregnant?
There's a lot of different opinions about those. You know, like a lot of people, what do I do when I travel and they go through the x-ray equipment? My experience traveling is they still work on the other end of the x-ray equipment, but you do want to be careful with them. You've got a remedy that is supposed to be a single isolated substance, right? That you're sending in your body to give your body a very clear message. So you don't want to mess that up. Like, you don't want to pollute the message that's going into your body. You want it to stay clear. So you're very careful not to let anything get in your bottles of your remedies. You want to keep them clean, so that remedy stays clear. You know, I don't set my cell phone next to them. I don't, you know, I do the best I can to keep those remedies clean and clear, but they're also stronger than you think. So you don't have to be paranoid either. That's my personal feeling on it.
Someone asked if you could use them during pregnancy.
Absolutely. Yep. It's not like an herb where there's a contraindication. Okay. You're going to be, if you're pregnant, you're going to be picking a remedy that matches your symptoms, right? So it'll be fine because you're picking the one that matches your current state, which includes being pregnant. You know, that'll be part of the picture. And so you're perfectly fine. There's no contraindications on these.
Okay. What do you do as far as carrying them in your purse with your cell phone?
I keep them as far away as I can. Yeah.
Okay, and then somebody's asking if they haven't enrolled for the class yet, do they need to do it tonight, and what is the cost of the class?
So the class, yeah, the class is $50. You can go on the website. I've made it ridiculously cheap on purpose. I want to get this to as many people as possible. You know, a normal homeopathic class out there is going to cost you $300 to $500. So I have made this as cheap as possible on purpose. Please help spread the word. They can join, anyone can join at any time because these are all going to be recorded. So if you miss a class, if you're behind, it's fine. You'll still have all the recordings. So whenever, it's good whenever. Okay.
Okay, I think that's it for the comments.
Okay. So, you know, I told you not to go out and buy remedies, but, okay. I just want to say, if you could only own 3, here's the 3 I would own. And I want to just tell you a little bit about these 3. Aconitum napellus. This one's nickname is aconite. Aconite is for anything that is sudden. That is its keynote, sudden. So this is good for any illness that suddenly comes on. This is the main remedy to try in the first 24 hours of an illness. When it's like all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I'm getting sick. I don't know really what's wrong yet. I don't have enough symptoms to know, but I'm getting sick. Take aconite. See if that knocks it out. This is the one you're going to use for shock. Someone's in a car accident, gets their leg cut off, and they're going into shock. You give them aconite. Okay. Someone's having a panic attack and they think they're going to die. You give them aconite. This is your main ER homeopathic remedy. Okay. Arnica is another ER remedy, but in a different way. Arnica is for injuries. Anything that gets bruised, bumped, hurt, scraped, take Arnica. You know, whether your kid fell down on your bike or you just came out of surgery, take Arnica. In the last class, we had a woman who went into surgery and she took Arnica right after, and she put on the Facebook group the picture of her IV on her hand with 0 discoloration. The Arnica took it all away. So, you know, it's great for anything that is an injury. Our Arsenicum album, we've talked about that one quite a bit already. This one is the one I have found to be the most common homeopathic for anxiety. It's not for all kinds of anxiety. And in our class on emotional health, we will tell you all the different remedies for anxiety. There's different types of anxiety, but this one is the one I have found to be the most common. The keynote for our Arsenicum album for anxiety is you deal with your anxiety by trying to control everything. So anyone feeling like life is a little bit out of control right now and feeling anxious, try some Arsenicum. Yeah, this is a good one. And then it's also digestive, right? We talked about that. This is the one for anxiety plus digestive issues. So this is also your homeopathic for traveler's diarrhea. This is one I would never leave home without. I would never leave home without any of these 3, ever, personally. Okay, so those are 3A remedies to always have with you. Okay, now I want to talk about 2 bonus ones I don't usually talk about, but for the moment, I just want you guys to see how these can pertain to right now. Sepia. Sepia is the #1 women's homeopathic. And one of the key descriptions of Sepia is mommy overwhelm. That's a little bit common right now with everyone quarantined. We have a lot of overwhelmed mommies. Some of the descriptions of Sepia is if you are locking yourself in a room to hide from your children, that is Sepia. Take Sepia. If you are to the point, shoot me, it would be better than this, that is Sepia. Take Sepia. If it is someone, please give me a vacation away from my family, Sepia. Take Sepia. Postpartum depression, take Sepia. Okay. This is your #1 homeopathic for mommies going under. So please, right now, while we have mommies are holding the world up, literally, please know about that remedy. It really can take the edge off of that very, very quickly. And then I just want to show you, there's a lot of theories going around right now, and we'll talk about these more in the coming classes about which homeopathics are the best match for the COVID-19. And there's several theories and ones that have been being tried around the world, and we'll talk about them. But, you know, just look at this particular description. If you had someone where the #1 issue was their lungs are filling up, and they cannot expel the junk from their chest, and so they are getting pneumonia. And it's particularly worse in the elderly and the babies. This is how COVID-19 started. It seems to be mutating and the symptoms are changing, but this is what it looked like when it started. These were the descriptions we were hearing, these terrible dry coughs, lungs filling up, can't get the mucus out, worse in elderly and babies. That homeopathic is Antimonium tartarticum. Okay, so I just want you to see the kinds of things you can target with these. It's just amazing the breadth and the depth of what homeopathy can help with. So here's what you know now. You've listened to me for 2 whole hours. Congratulations. You have learned what a homeopathic is and how they are made, the history of homeopathy and how they are used worldwide, the science of how homeopathics work and are proven, how to use the medical approach of like cures like, because you've got to stand on your head. It's different than what we're used to. The advantages of homeopathic treatment, the rules of homeopathic treatment, how to do a symptom-based treatment, what symptoms to look for, and the resources for choosing and buying homeopathics. So I know that is a lot of information in this class, and that's why we record these, so that you can go back and listen to this as many times as you need to digest all the information. I know it's a lot, but I hope that has opened up a whole new world for you. If there are things you have been struggling with that you have not been able to find a solution to, it's very, very possible that homeopathy holds the key. So if you want to dig deeper, for those of you who are not already enrolled in the class, here's what we will cover. There's the website where you can go sign up if you want to continue and go for the remainder of the classes. Here's what our next classes are going to be for those of you who are in the class: how to administer a homeopathic, how to use gentle homeopathy remedies, how we do this for acute illness and injury, mental emotional health, and chronic illness. So we're going to take a class and show you now how to take all these principles we've talked about today and put them into the specifics. Okay, so if you've got questions that are going to be answered in the next 5 days, I don't necessarily want to keep all of you guys on the call answering a lot of questions that we're going to get to in the coming days. But if you've got questions that are about what we've covered tonight, let's open it up for Q&A. I don't want to leave anyone confused or overwhelmed tonight. So if you've got questions, please let us know. What can we answer for you?
Okay, and is there a homeopathic book you recommend for quick reference? I'm assuming not the huge ones.
Yes, I will post that on the Facebook group, a link, and it's also for those who are in the class. It's also on the web page where we've linked a whole bunch of resources for you. But I can also post. I don't have it sitting here. Sorry, I can't grab it. But yeah, I can post a link to that on the Facebook group so that they can see that. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you had fun. I think this topic is so fun. And I'm sure you'll have lots of questions as we continue. So if you're coming back tomorrow, I hope you're coming back tomorrow, we'll get into all of those specifics about potencies and frequency and dosage and more specifics about choosing a remedy, so that you can actually see how to start actually using them, and if you have a remedy, and what now to do with it so that you can use it correctly. So that's what tomorrow's class will be. All right, if you have any additional, there's going to be people obviously watching this delayed who couldn't be here tonight. If you have questions, that's what the Homeopathy Facebook group is for. Feel free to ask your questions there if you have questions between classes. you can ask your questions there. And like I say, it's a great resource because not only are you going to can you get me to answer questions, but there's a lot of other people now that have been doing this for a while that can pipe in and help answer questions as well. So that's a great resource. And if you want to ask questions broader than just homeopathy, if you are not on the Simply Divine Eating community Facebook group, that is my main Q&A hub where we talk about all things health. So if you want to join that, you can just search for that in Facebook, Simply Divine Eating Community. And that's an open forum for anyone. You don't have to take my classes or anything to be in that. It's just an open forum where we can answer each other's questions and share suggestions. So that's another great resource as well.
So for people who aren't joining the 6 class session, they could ask their homeopathy questions in that group.
Yes. Yeah, I can't answer all the questions that come individually in email. It just gets completely out of hand. So yes, if you have questions for me, please, 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 please ask them in the Simply Divine Eating community, because that way I can answer one question that probably will have been asked by 10 people in one place, and it's a much more efficient way to answer questions. So yes, that is where to ask me questions. Thank you for that, Crystal. Anything else? Okay. Thank you. Have a great night's sleep, and we will see you tomorrow.